My name is Speech-kweddell. This is Com 101, Speech 3, The Informative Speech. Today's of inspiration, playing hooky, making something out of nothing, the need to express, to communicate. Viva la vie, bohème. It was 1998 when I first heard these words midway through a performance of Rent, a musical about struggling artists, their friends, and an epidemic, AIDS. I was really touched by the message of this musical, No Day But Today, despite the depressing subject matter. And when I learned more about the story of Jonathan Larson, the man who wrote the book and lyrics and music to this show, I became even more fascinated by it. Today I want to share his story and how he was inspired to write the musical Rent. Jonathan Larson was born February 4th, 1960, to parents Al and Nan Larson. He had an older sister named Julie also. Though his parents were not themselves musical, they were big supporters of the arts and often took their children to see the ballet and different shows in New York. It was always a really special occasion for them. According to his best friend Matthew O'Grady in the Rent book, he said, the Larsons were a very embracing family. His father Al always said, pursue your dreams. In 1978, Jonathan graduated from high school, winning a 4-year scholarship to Adelphi University in Long Island with a 4-year acting scholarship. In 1982, he graduated with a BA in Fine Arts, but at that time, he had been just starting to write music and write shows, and so he was debating, do I go in for auditions or do I start focusing on writing? He had met playwright Stephen Sondheim while he was in college, and so he went to this famous writer for advice. And Sondheim said, there are more working pianists than there are working actors. So at that point, Jonathan said to his parents, I've decided to really focus on my writing rather than go on auditions. And though everybody had always seen him as this great actor and saw him moving forward with that, he told his mother that he always kind of knew that that was the direction his life was going to go. He moved to New York to a really run-down apartment on Greenwich Street. His old roommate, Jonathan Burkhart, described their apartment as, there was a kitchen with a bathtub. Then he went into one giant room where I had built a wall, creating 2 rooms, though one had no windows. The next room was the living room, where John kept his keyboard and computer and crappy TV. An element of this apartment was definitely put into the musical Rent, and another really kind of famous element to this was at Jonathan's apartment, you had to call him to let you into the building, and he had to throw his keys down from the balcony so that people could get in. And this was something else that played a role in the musical. While his friends got him jobs writing jingles and he did some writing for Sesame Street and developed a show called Away We Go for children's television, he never really pursued that sort of thing on his own. Instead, he arranged to work at the Moondance Diner, where he served Fridays through Sundays and then spent Monday through Thursday working full-time on his writing. In 1986, he showed his friends music from his first complete work, Superbia. When he finished having all of his friends listen to it, he declared to them, I'm the future of the American musical. He was influenced a lot by Jesus Christ Superstar and Hair, and said that he really wanted to move the MTV generation into the theater generation, combining the Broadway traditions of song and music into rock music. Though there was a lot of good reception to Superbia, he never really fully developed it. At this point, it was 7 years after he graduated, and he was getting really frustrated with his career. It was about this point that he also learned that his best friend, Matthew O'Grady, was diagnosed as HIV positive. He really vented all of his frustrations into a one-man show called Tick, Tick, Boom. Again, this one had a really good reception, but just never fully developed and never got produced. Through an organization called Playwrights Horizon, he met a man named Billy Aronson who wanted to update Puccini's La Bohème, an opera about struggling artists in turn-of-the-century Paris dying of tuberculosis. They saw a lot of parallels between their lives in the 80s as struggling artists in New York whose friends were dying of AIDS. Though they had creative differences, the story did kind of come together, and Jonathan decided to continue to pursue it on his own. There were a lot of parts of Rent that came from his life. There was a group called Friends Indeed that he went to with his best friend that became a group called Life Support in the musical. The lyrics from a song called Will I came from a fear that somebody shared in a Friends Indeed meeting. Will I lose my dignity? He wasn't afraid of dying, he was afraid of losing his dignity, and Jonathan took that inspiration and put that into the song. He also named some characters in that group, Pam, Gordon, and Allie, after friends that ultimately died before Rent debuted. In spring 1984, he received the Richard Rogers Development Grant paying for the workshop version of the show. At that point, they started pulling in people who might be interested in producing, where Jeffrey Seller and Kevin McCollum saw it and decided that they wanted to invest in the show. At the New York Theater Workshop is where they really set up the show, and people started to kind of get a buzz about it. The New York Times were going to do a story on it because it corresponded with the 100th anniversary of La Boheme. The one thing that there was a lot of argument about was Jonathan's really hopeful philosophy, no day but today. The producers were saying, people who are dying, they're going to be a lot more angry about what's going on. And while he incorporated that in there, he never really got rid of that really hopeful philosophy. In 1996, the show was scheduled to run from January to March. On January 25th, the day that Rent was to debut at the New York Theater Workshop, Jonathan Larson was found on the floor of his apartment at about 1 o'clock a.m., and he had died of an aortic aneurysm. Buzz about the play grew even more and became so popular that only weeks later they decided to move it to Broadway. So he missed his big break by just a few weeks. Ultimately, friends and family agreed that Jonathan wrote Rent to save people. He was tired of seeing homeless people being stepped over in the streets by people who had so much. He was tired of seeing his friends die in an epidemic that nobody really seemed to care about. His sister Julie, when accepting the Tony Award for him, said, "It took my brother Johnny 15 years of really hard work to become an overnight sensation. So we'd like to dedicate this award to all those who are out there still working in restaurants, still driving taxis, and doing whatever they have to do to scrape by for their art. Stay true to yourselves and to your dreams, and know they can come true." And that was the point of Jonathan's musical Rent.